My name is Lars Rudolph. I'm a managing partner at Cyberweight, and I'm hosting the session today. A warm welcome from Switzerland to all the attendees, wherever they may be at the moment. Thanks you for joining. First, housekeeping thing, the session will be recorded. I will make it available later today or at the latest tomorrow, and you will receive a link to the recording. So if you're not able to be with us to the end, or if you know someone who wasn't able to join, you can forward this link and we will send around the link. Yeah, and today's topic, cloud security. My guest today is Lior Zatlavi. And Lior, maybe you can introduce yourself, probably better than I can.
Sure. Thank you, Lars, for hosting us. I'm Lior. I'm a senior cloud security architect for a company called Ermetic. What we do is we provide an holistic security solution for cloud environments. Just a little bit about myself. I come from a very technical background. Originally, I was a developer and then moved to roles such as development team leader and product manager and architect, all in the cybersecurity domain. I did most of my original work for the Israeli government. So I was in the IDF for quite a bit of time. After that, in Israel's Prime Minister's office. And then after that, I started a consulting practice where Ermetic was actually one of my clients. And eventually, because I could relate so much to the challenges that Ermetic solves and to the domain where this challenge that we're obviously going to talk about it today just grows and grows, I onboarded full time, and I'm personally really happy about that. Yeah, so that's just me. I also have in my training, I have a bachelor's degree in mathematics and a master's degree in electrical engineering. So also quite a bit of an academic background. And I'm happy to be here to talk about cloud security.
Perfect. Thank you, Lior. As probably most of our attendees know, we launched a little poll in LinkedIn prior to the event, and I just want to share with you the results. So we asked, how do you manage and check your public cloud security configuration? And most of the people responded that they're using the cloud provider's native tools, and some are just starting. So we have a quite diverse audience today. So I think that's great to have different levels of experience and different thoughts and experiences here in the call today. The Q&A session, the Q&A section within Zoom is open for everyone. And because obviously Lior and myself, we did some preparation for the call today, and we thought about what, from our point of view, makes cloud security complex. But maybe your thoughts are completely different. So it would be great if everyone could just type in the Q&A section what from their point of view is complex about cloud security. And during the session today, we can catch up and maybe help you with your issue you have. All right, so let's start with the discussion. From your experience, Lior, what is it about the cloud that makes it different when it comes to security, different to the old on-premise world?
Yeah, so I think that a lot of things have changed when we're in this new ballgame when it comes to infrastructure because of the adoption of cloud. A lot of companies start today as cloud native. A lot of companies are migrating their workloads into the cloud. So what changes really is the fact that if we were used to in the past that we had this paradigm where there's so much that you need to do yourself in order to set up infrastructure in things that are not logical, so to speak. You have to set up racks of servers, and you have to do wiring and networking, and you have to even maintain buildings and infrastructure. That now a lot of that has changed. Everything, almost everything, became logical. Everything became an API call. So now when you need to manage your infrastructure, most of what that looks like is making API calls, or click ops in the not so good version of it. And that really changes the game. It makes things a lot more ephemeral, right? It makes things so much more dynamic. And it has, of course, plus size. It has pros and cons to it. Because of course, when services become that much more available, everything becomes more elastic. You can scale much easier. And the business side that demands these services is also aware of it. And they're going to come with more demands, and they're going to tell you, look, I want this, and I want it sooner than I would when I know you had the constraints of actually having to physically set up your infrastructure. Then you'll be able to move faster, and people will demand to move faster. But of course, and this really brings us to what we're talking about today, this kind of aspect has a lot of complexity in it and a lot of potential for making mistakes, right? Because if everything is so ephemeral, then things can very easily get configured wrong in a way that significantly increases your exposure, your attack surface, and the blast radius from such potential mistake, right? This is the one thing that really changed a lot, the elasticity and how things are ephemeral and much more easy to define and much easier to get wrong. That's number one. And I think the second thing is that there used to be, there still is, metaphorically, I think, there used to be this wall between infrastructure people, or IT, or in the past life, how we would call them, and the development organization, right? So the way it would work is, metaphorically, how it was conceptualized in the past, I remember from my early days, is that developers would write code, would produce applications that would eventually need to be thrown over this metaphorical wall that the infrastructure people would take and then maintain it. And there was a very clear division, right? There's a very clear division as to what is development work and what is infrastructure work. And there wasn't as much, I would say, friction or involvement between the two as there is today, because today, that wall is, some people say it's still breaking down. Some people say it's almost completely gone because things become much more approachable in the cloud, right? They're not just logical, as we mentioned before, but they're also more approachable because you don't have to come with this entire knowledge base of how to approach a server. You don't have to have a lot of credentials or even access to a physical location in order to manage them. It's much easier to provide you with this access and for you to gain it yourself. And so a lot of the times you do. So there are a lot more hands in the cookie jar of the infrastructure, right? So things have become also more distributed, and that is, again, it has its pros because when something can get distributed, it can be managed in a more efficient way. If you can get your hands around it. But again, it serves a lot of challenges when you want to have proper control of how things are managed. And that is a huge challenge when it comes to the cloud. So when you combine all that with how environments scale and how dynamic they are, and when you also think about the fact that there is a huge shortage of talent when it comes to these technologies, because unlike past technology that's been around for decades, this is still relatively new technology, and we don't have that doesn't have a lot of tradition, right? It's not that new. It didn't start last year or the year before that. I think it's been around for something like 15 years since it started out, but there still isn't like a massive amount, or at least enough of talent to serve all of this, all of these huge challenges. And that creates shortage. And when you have that, combined with the fact that this is incredibly complicated technology to maintain and can easily get wrong, that's how you get this sort of perfect storm that makes it really challenging for us as security professionals, for the security profession in general when it comes to securing the cloud, and why companies like Ermetic has such great business.
So you mentioned a lot of opportunities from an operational side. You managed a lot of threat from a security side. Is there also opportunity in a security side? It's not only everything is black. Is there also something white in this area?
I actually think so. I may have been a bit too maybe I sounded a bit too let's say to the wrong side, or to the downside when it comes to security. But there is actually also huge opportunity when you look at it from the security standpoint. And but there is an asterisk on that. So the opportunity, or at least the way we see it, is that if you're able to gain control, use the fact that everything is an API call, so to speak, and everything is accessible in parsable chunks of data. A lot of them, of course, and very complex and very hard to process correctly. But if you really wrap your hands around it, and you're able to process all this information and digest it and analyze it correctly, so you provide the security professionals with just what they need in order to solve problems, and create a much smaller attack surface and blast radius from breaches, then you can have greater control over your environment, right? So you can use what we described as the challenge from a security standpoint, or the pro or the advantage from an operational standpoint. You can use that advantage to your advantage as a security professional, because for a very long time, generally, security people want to have this kind of control, right? And it's much easier to gain this kind of control if you do the kind of processing correctly. So if you create what we call a unified platform for all the layers of cybersecurity, because cybersecurity traditionally has been viewed as a practice that you do in layers, right? Layered security, or security in depth. So you have the network, and you have the computing, and you have data that you need to take care of, and you have runtime security, and you need to take care of secrets, and you need to take care of identity and access management. All of these things have been viewed as different layers that you have to maintain separately. Now, the operational aspect or advantage of managing the cloud, you can actually apply it to managing all these layers together in a unified platform. This is what's called CNAPP, or Cloud Native Application Protection. It's a new Gartner category that basically allows you to say, okay, now I'm going to have a unified platform where I have all this information processed and served to me, that I can now analyze very easily where is going to be the attack, where is going to be the actual attack vector through all these layers. So it's a switch from viewing it as separate layers to having a unified view of it. And it's actually possible because everything became logical, because everything is now easily processed by one platform, which is a CNAPP platform such as Ermetic. Now you have this kind of opportunity to have this kind of control. So that is what I think is the opportunity here. And so I think it just makes the point of applying such a platform to be that much more important, because if you don't apply it and you let things get out of hand, then the fact that things are so ephemeral and elastic and very hard to manage is a huge threat. But if you do apply this kind of platform and you have the tools necessary in order to process this data in a way that's effective and unified and holistic, and doesn't even require that much of an expertise to actually understand it, then you can use that operational advantage to your advantage as a security professional. And I think that's huge.
Because you can correlate the data from the different layers. make a holistic view, a holistic assessment of the security in very easily compared to the old world. I agree.
Exactly.
Yep.
It's something that we couldn't even dream of as
Mhm.
security professionals in the past. And this is something that now we have, using tools like Ermetic, we have the advantage, we have the opportunity to do it. So again, that's how I see it, as an opportunity, instead of making it a threat.
Yeah. You mentioned one of the layers are identities and entitlements. Why do you think it's so important? That's the so important aspect in terms of cloud security.
Yeah, so actually, I think that identities and entitlements are one of, I think, the most underserved layers in the practice of securing cloud infrastructure. And this is actually one of the layers, or I would say the layer, where we as a solution specialize in. We of course provide security for all the different aspects, but we really are the market leader when it comes to analyzing identities and their entitlements. And we got to that position by investing a lot of time and a lot of effort into becoming experts and to really shaping our product to serve it. And what I mean by that is we do very thorough analysis of identities and the permissions that they have, and make sure, based on analyzing logs, that the permissions that they currently have are just what they need. So you can strive to achieve something called least privilege. So every identity just has the permissions that it actually needs to have, and not more than that. So if, heaven forbid, the identity is breached, then the fallout from that is as small as possible, and the ability to laterally move is significantly minimized. Mm-hmm. Now, the reason why this is so important, and specifically important in the cloud, is that identities and entitlements in the various cloud providers are something that is very, very easy to get wrong, because of the fact that everything is ephemeral, as we mentioned. That, of course, doesn't exclude permissions. And in fact, when it comes to permissions can actually become very, very, very loose. And it's also very tempting to have them very, very loose, because all you need to do in order to give some identity, even admin permissions to your environment, is just put a star or a couple of stars in the wrong place. And it's very tempting to do so, because as DevOps professionals, or as developers even, that have this kind of access and can define these kinds of policies, their agenda really is to have things work, right? And if something is extremely overprivileged, then that's usually not something that you care about as a company until it's too late, until there's a breach, and perhaps the breached identity can now do something that it shouldn't have been able to do. So the disadvantage that we talked about before is really, really vivid when it comes to setting permissions, because it's just the easiest place to do it. And again, a lot of companies don't really pay enough attention to it. It really is underserved. And it's also underserved when it comes to the kind of technologies that there is out there that would allow you to achieve least privilege with not so much effort. Because if you have to invest a lot of effort into it, then it's probably not going to be something that you do, and you're going to be still very, very exposed. And really the sad thing is that usually you're not going to care until it's too late. And that is why tools like ours, what we do in that specific aspect, is not just tell you, look, there's a problem here, but also give you the actual artifact, the policy that's specifically designed in order to give you the ability to just apply it and really minimize the kind of permissions that identities have. Now, and one more thing. Sorry about that. No, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I recently read an article, and I really like the term attack surface and blast radius, because it's very good describes the way you can use identities. You can make sure that in case something happens, the outcome is not, or the impact is not that wide ranging.
Precisely. And the thing is, and this is why, again, we put a lot of focus into it, is that when it comes to entitlement management, it's one of those things that if you just put in the right kind of technology and you have the right kind of practices, you can actually achieve very, very effective results, right? So compare that, for example, to your ability to mitigate, vulnerabilities, right, on computing workloads. Right, you can do your best in order to find them, right? And our product also provides you with that ability. But there will always be 0 days, right? There will always be new stuff coming up, and it's always going to be this, this cat and mouse game for you to work it out. But when it comes to permissions, if you apply the right kind of tools, it actually is very possible for you to make it to least privilege if you have the right kind of technology in place. Even if you can't, so to speak, predict every possible activity, you can still do stuff. For example, like one of our new abilities is the ability to provide access just in time for certain roles and for certain environments that are sensitive. And that because you have that kind of control, right? If you do it right, if you plan it correctly, and you provide the access just at the right time, you can achieve very, very effective results. And again, this is why it's very, very I think a missed opportunity if you don't apply the right kind of practices in that specific domain.
I agree. Yeah, there's actually a question from Christian, which is, from my point of view, something that would fit here in our discussion. So he asked, what's your view on security by segregating tiers and applications with firewalls, etc., versus zero knowledge concepts? Would it be an option to combine them?
Yeah, so I think network security and segregation is also a very, very important domain. It also something, by the way, that our product deals with. We don't do just analysis, for example, of identities and permissions, but we also look at network configuration and architecture. So you understand who can communicate with who, and, for example, what kind of computing resources you have, which are public to the internet, which is, again, something that you have to be very, very minded of, and exactly how they are public to the internet. So definitely a very, very significant layer. And again, not to and it's traditionally, of course, has been a very, very significant layer. And it doesn't change. And again, even here, even in the cloud, network configuration is also done by applying changes with API calls. Right, so you can configure, for example, a firewall or in a specific environment by just sending a command, right? So, and you imagine, for example, the permission to manage the firewall is given in an unintended manner, right? Because someone just has over permissions. Then they can actually change the network configuration and allow a resource that hasn't been accessible via the network to become accessible via the network, right? So this is just an example of how these layers even interact with one another.
So we discussed already a lot about what the aspects are that make this complexity up. So what is your approach to manage it?
I think that there are several things or several approaches that you need to employ when you come to solve such a huge challenge. And I think the number one thing would be to start with the end in mind, or start with what you're dealing with in mind. And for that, you need to adopt a mindset of thinking like an attacker. So your security strategy must be built around the business that you're there to protect. So, and this is something that we also see a lot of people in the industry not always get right. because they usually see their security strategy built around technologies, which is not optimal, because what you want to do is you want to think about your assets, what you are there to protect, what the business actually cares about, and what it's there to serve. What would a threat mean to your business? What does a threat what would a threat being realized would mean? The business impact, the data loss, reputation, business continuity, things like that. So when you have this kind of attacker mindset or business-oriented thinking, when you have that applied, that makes things a whole lot easier. Because first of all, you're in a much better position to get support from your organization, right? When you go and you present yourself and say, these are the things that we want to protect, this is how we're going to do it, it shows a lot of commitment from you to your business. And it gets a lot of people onboarded, because of course they care about the business as well. It doesn't matter if they're DevOps people, or if they're business people, or if they're executives. You're all there to serve the business, and you're one of those people. You're not there just to do a cloud security solution. You're not there just to do an entitlement management solution. You're there to protect the business. So once you have that, and it's much easier to actually do things effectively. In fact, we did a survey last year around the maturity of companies when it comes to cloud security. And one of the funny things that we found, or the non-intuitive things that we found in that survey, is that some companies actually spend more on cloud security, and they're less mature than the companies that don't spend as much. And the reason for this gap, or at least the way we analyze it, is that some companies, again, their approach is to just adopt technology. Just say, okay, I'm going to adopt the shiny new thing and use it, and that's probably going to solve my problem. Then they get to what we call spending vertigo, right? You get new technology, you use it, and it doesn't solve the problem, right? You still have bad posture, or you get incidents, or whatnot, and so you go and you take new technology and you spend more and more and more, instead of actually focusing around your business and what you need to protect, and making the most out of the technologies that you actually employ. So this is the one thing, right? Centering your security around your business. The other thing is building your security as an approach of your organization being mature. What that means is that security is not an event, right? It's not something that you do overnight, or in a quarter, or in a year. Security is something that keeps on happening, right? It's a process. It's something that you need to keep on iterating your organization to become more and more secure, and it's not something that you can achieve in one single leap. And again, this is something that some companies do miss, is because they think, okay, now we're going to have this project, and at the end of the project, we're going to be fine. So that's not really how it works. The way that and again, this is the approach that we designed for it, is that you need to look at the various aspects, or the various parameters, you can call it layers, whatever you want, that make up your cloud security strategy. And you need to see how they correspond with one another, and you need to advance them simultaneously. And you need to design roadmaps that will give you actual accomplishments in not a very long period of time, so you can actually measure how you're doing. And we've actually built a framework for that. We call it the Cloud Security Maturity Model, that we also surveyed, what I referenced before. And this actually gives you the ability to say, okay, this is what I'm going to achieve next quarter, and I'm going to assess myself after I'm going to do it, and then I'm going to repeat this process again. I'm going to assess my situation again. I'm going to see what are the things that I need to do after that, and repeat the process again. And again, it doesn't end, right? Because you can't say, okay, this is it, now I'm secure. It doesn't work that way, because technology moves, and you have to move along with it. Otherwise, you're going to get backwards. So these are like the two major things that I would say as an approach. It's important for you to adopt when you want to secure something at scale. Other than that, there are a lot of more aspects that are very important. So for example, shifting left security is very, very important. So focusing a lot of effort in the lower layers. So when things, that is, testing and staging. So when things go into production, first of all, that your security mechanisms work and they don't, and they actually don't hurt the business. And the other thing is that, you catch security issues early on. Of course, your production it needs to be very, very secure, but you can actually detect things before they actually move to production. It's very, very important. It's a very, very important aspect of it. One example that I can think of for that practice is around entitlement. So one of the things that our product does is it allows you to analyze activity of workloads when you test them. So after you test them, you can actually generate a policy made up. You can automatically, of course, generate this policy made up of the actions that they perform. So you can take that policy and then apply it to production. So when they get to production, they don't have this, overprivileged policy, just have what it is that they actually need. So this is a great way of, looking at things in lower layers and then applying it. Of course, another great example, which is also something that our product offers, is scanning infrastructure as code or configuration. That when you do it in the testing environment, and you can find misconfigurations, you can remediate them before it moves to production. So that is another aspect. And I think that those are like the main things to focus on. I think I can do this all day, but I think we have more things before we run out of time.
Yeah, and maybe another thought, which is from my point of view extremely important to manage complexity. It's about prioritizing. So you already mentioned you have to focus and think about what you want to protect. So this is prioritizing at a high level, and in the day-to-day work you get probably overwhelmed by a lot of findings that are coming up of the tools that you're using, and you also have to prioritize findings. So what you start with. So managing complexity from my point of view is very much about prioritizing.
I agree 100%. And I think that this is another advantage of the ability to correlate information in a unified platform from all sorts of layers, because you can actually understand what is the most current and most relevant threat right now, taking all things into consideration. And again, this is something that we couldn't do before we had the ability to actually fuse all this information together, because it comes from one API or two API. If you're using multiple clouds, that's also possible in a unified platform like that. So definitely, prioritization is a very important aspect of managing cybersecurity.
Perfect. So we have two additional questions I would ask now, because it fits in our discussion. We have a question from Giuseppe. From his point of view, the complexity also comes from multiple clouds, combining SaaS and PaaS, different platforms, and all the stuff. So what is your approach? What is your view on that?
So I think you need to look at, first of all, PaaS and IaaS, infrastructure as a service. They're like two different aspects. But definitely when it comes to infrastructure as a service, and you have some companies, of course, do apply a multi-cloud strategy. For example, they use AWS and GCP, or GCP and Azure and AWS. And that actually adds a lot to the complexity that we talked about. Instead of needing to have people on the payroll that are expert in AWS or AWS security, now you actually need to have people on the payroll that know two platforms or three platforms. And I think that this is another aspect of where having a unified platform that takes all the information and streamlines it to one console. And again, this is another one of the things that our product does, is that you get in one console, in one pane of glass, you get information from all the different vendors of your infrastructure. And you also get it in a way that is streamlined. That is the different kind of terminology that is used in different for different vendors.
Yep.
Is actually streamlined into one place. So the identities, you can look at all the identities in one place and understand which ones are using which, and what kind of permissions that they have, and or the network analysis is done. And you see it in just one place. You can look at the entire set of public resources that you have, and it doesn't matter if they come from Azure or they come from AWS. You can ask a simple question: get me all the public resources from all my cloud providers that are interfaced with it, and you can get the answer. So, and this is very, very crucial because, again, if you were to ask a team of people doing it, they would have to have the kind of expertise of dealing with the different cloud providers,
yep,
and then getting the information and applying it and give you the answers. So again, that's actually a huge part of the challenge. The multi-cloud aspect of it, it's huge because there, again, not a lot of people out there who are familiar cross cloud platforms.
Yeah. And it's, again, prioritization. I mean, it's even worse if you have multiple cloud providers and you have to prioritize findings among the cloud providers.
Exactly.
Okay. And our last question, at least at the moment, please feel free to ask additional questions. We have, we're very happy to answer them. One question from Flamur. I hope I pronounce it correctly. From my point of view, what is really challenging these days associated with the cloud infrastructure is maintaining an up-to-date list of inventories of the environments used, services enabled and used, microservices, databases, which are required due to the regulatory requirements. I totally agree. It has been hard in the on-premise environment. I haven't seen that many CMDBs that are really working and up to date, but in the daily or at least weekly deployments, how can you keep track of all the inventories?
Exactly. And we talked about this, that environments are so dynamic and they change a lot, and a lot more people can now change them because they have this kind of access, and it's so hard to keep track, and things change. And if you don't have an automated way of doing it, of gathering the information and analyzing it, then it's going to be very hard.
But then the API approach also helps, right? Because it's easier to build a platform or build a tool to gather all that information. It's easier than in the old world where it's different approaches, different APIs, different whatever. That has to be combined. Yeah.
Exactly.
All right. Next thing I would like to discuss with you is the cloud providers' native tools. From the poll we know that around 60% of the participants of the poll use the cloud providers' native tools. What is your view on these tools?
So these tools, and again, it depends on what you use them for. So these tools are, I think they're pretty good for people who are just starting out, as you would say. And the first thing that they want to do is they want to maybe ask some specific questions about maybe specific resources when it comes to the cloud. So these tools are, again, in my view, they're a great start, because usually you get them out of the box. A lot of the times you don't have to pay for them. Sometimes they do have pricing, of course, you need to look into that. But they are very, very available. And if you're starting out and you have sort of that itch, to solve certain problems, and you come to the conclusion that you want to solve certain problems, and you have that available, then starting out with these tools is not a bad thing. because they will give you answers and you will see the feedback, and you will, of course, you might run into some problems of, trying to scale it and trying to, automate certain processes. But then when you're going to run into these problems, then you're going to know your environment better, you're going to know the challenges better, and you're going to be in a better position to maybe say, okay, now I need something to do it at scale. So again, generally, I would say that these tools are a great start. However, and again, this is something that you need to always take into consideration. There is in the cloud, there is what's called the shared responsibility model. So the shared responsibility model, I sort of think the name might have needed to be a bit different, because you can't really share responsibility. The way I see it, it's a sort of, and I didn't coin this term. I don't remember where I heard it first, but I think it's sort of more like a split responsibility model.
Yep.
Because the vendor is responsible for certain things, and you're responsible for certain things, for other things, mostly things that you have also the power to configure and change. So when you have the parts of the security that are under your responsibility, then it's very easy to understand why the vendor would not necessarily say, okay, this is where I want to put my focus in providing you with the tools that will be the ultimate tools in solving these problems. Because what they would, that's not where they make most of their bottom line. Their bottom line is they sell you, workloads and storage and even network traffic and stuff like that. That is where they actually look into their bottom line. So not to say that they're not going to invest anything in it, because they do provide you with these kinds of tools, but you need to think about that. The fact is that sort of, if I were to put myself in their position, my agenda would be to be better than the next cloud provider in that aspect, right? Not necessarily to give you everything that you need to have an easy job of meeting what's your responsibility. So, and when you look at things in that context, you understand that when you want to go and you want to scale, you want to have ultimate control. You want to have very good ability to monitor and to analyze all the data, and of course to do it holistically for a multi-cloud deployment, right? To have it in one place, things from all sorts of clouds, right? Not just because, of course, a native tool is usually effective for the service provider that provides it. So when you understand that, then you understand, okay, I'm going to need a tool that comes from a company that its main business is to support me in the parts where I'm responsible. So this is why you see, and again, you see a lot of companies go into that business. Sorry. Because it's such good business, right? There's a huge challenge, and you need great tech to meet it.
Perfect. We just received another question. It's really great that we get that many questions. We rarely have that in our CISO talks. So thanks to all the attendees. A question from Engelbert. From my point of view, it is all okay and a good solution. There are a lot of different vendors out there like Orca, Palo Alto, etc. But what is with the SaaS applications? Nobody knows anything about shadow SaaS, etc. Might be I'm wrong. So what about the SaaS applications organizations use?
Well, that's a different challenge. What we do mostly is we handle the infrastructure part of it, and SaaS is a completely different challenge, and I think there are other companies that meet it.
Yeah, maybe the SaaS providers should use a tool like Ermetic to make sure that their service is configured properly.
Well, they do. A lot of them do.
Yeah.
A lot of them do.
Yeah.
But
it still doesn't solve the problem that the security teams have to keep track of the SaaS applications they're using. But I think this has to be solved on an organizational level. I mean, we just recently had a new customer onboarded, or we onboarded a tool with a new customer, and they had a quite extensive cloud approval process. So if you want to keep track on all the SaaS applications in your environment, you have to have processes in place integrated into the purchasing process to make sure that all of these SaaS environments really come across the security teams.
Yeah, and another thing to keep in mind is that sometimes some SaaS solutions actually need access to your infrastructure. And that is something that you have to keep very close eye on, because usually these are also the kind of tools that you give a lot of permissions to. And if they are breached, the SaaS company is breached, then the attacker might leverage that breach in order to get your information. So as in every third party, you need to make sure you need to have a lot of close tabs on what kind of access you give to what solution.
So I just see that Engelbert raised a hand. So I would allow you to talk, and maybe we just get your question wrong, Engelbert. So go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can.
Okay, so it's surely a good solution, and if you are in multi-cloud, and if you're in the cloud, you have also to use or you are using SaaS applications, and the SaaS applications, they are also a problem for a lot of companies, because they didn't know about what shadow SaaS application we are using, what data is going in or out of shadow IT SaaS applications, and what about on and offboarding of people in my SaaS applications. So if you want to have a complete solution, first of all, okay, you have to use your Azure and Google Cloud and your multi-cloud and whatever, and you have to protect like your solution. There are some other vendors out, like Orca solution, like Palo Alto, like Fortinet, or whatever. But you have also to look about the SaaS management, and then you have a complete picture of your problems.
Yep.
Otherwise, it's my opinion, it's one puzzle, but you have no complete solution.
I agree, but I think SaaS, as I mentioned, is a different aspect here. Maybe we can have this as a separate CISO talk later on.
Sure, right.
Yeah. Okay.
For sure,
perfect.
for sure. But that is for my opinion. Then I have a complete solution, and then I'm not 100% safe, but I have a more safe solution than if I go only to Azure or to whatever. So okay. That's my opinion.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much. All right. We have around 10 minutes left. So I would say one more question for you, Lior, before we close it. In the poll, we saw that a lot of people are just starting their cloud security journey. What would be the best approach to be as secure as possible from the very beginning? What would be your approach here?
Yeah, so I think as we mentioned before, I think security needs to be a lot around the business. So I would suggest someone maybe starting out a new role as a CISO, is to first of all get to know the business that they're there to protect. So get to know your assets, as we mentioned, do the risk management, analyze the threats, understand what the business care about and what might actually happen if those threats are realized. That's number one. And more than that is build relationships within the organization. I think that a lot of the things that you do as a security professional relies on the trust that people have in you, not just in your technical abilities and in in your experience, but also how they trust you, as a person. And this also, by the way, really correlates with the first thing that we talked about, because again, as we mentioned before, if you make it clear that you're there to protect the business and enable the business, then it's going to be a lot easier to do that. And after that, what I would say is a good approach to at least starting out is, first of all, assess what your current status is. And one of the ways to do that, by the way, is using our framework for it, the maturity model framework that we published, and assess your current situation, at least for the cloud, and assess your current situation and understand where it is that you want to take your organization in a specific period of time, and then iterate on it all the time. Again, remember, it's a process. And when you do that, I think at least from my experience, the most effective way to do that is to determine projects that you want to run within your organization, and you can very easily articulate them to people within the organization. So, for example, say I want to remove all unnecessary use of static credentials, which is a huge problem. And that is also something that's very easy to articulate to people within the organization. To do it responsibly, of course, it's also a very complicated task. But once you do it, you reduce a lot of the risk. And not only that, but you also build relationships within the organization, because this is the sort of process that you need a lot of help for. Usually these projects are, again, they're not something you run by yourself from your office, but you build a lot of relationships within the organization. And also you get to know the kind of infrastructure and the kind of applications that you need to protect, because you have to, as part of that process. So that is how I would start, generally in securing the environment.
And when is a good time to start the security journey?
So I think as soon as possible. I think that security is something that, unless you really embed it to the DNA, both of the environment, of the tech that you have in place, but also into the actual organization, then the later you do it, the later you try to introduce it, so to speak, it's going to be harder. Because if you're not doing it from the get-go, then it's going to be a lot, you're going to accumulate what is called security debt. Right, you're going to do it's a special kind of technical or even organizational debt that if it can accumulate and even compound over time as the environment changes. Right, now that doesn't mean that every organization needs to spend a lot of time on security, but you actually always have to be very minded to security. Right, even when you're starting out, you still need to do this kind of risk assessment to understand what is your general risk, and make sure that you have controls in place to control it. And as the environment grows and as the company grows, and things get more complicated, you always need to make that assessment, and you can't do it soon enough. That's at least the way I view it. And again, a lot of companies do make that mistake of sort of starting out the journey, but doing it, late enough so they have enough of a problem, so it becomes a really big project, and they keep on putting it off because they don't have the time to allocate to such a challenge that it has become, because they didn't do it early enough.
And the business keeps running, and you have to rush to catch up and keep the track. And in the cloud world, they're running even faster than in the old world. So it's a good idea to start at the very beginning. I totally agree. Okay, we have coming to an end of our CISO talk today. Thank you, Lior, for joining us. It was really a good discussion with a lot of insights, and I hope all our attendees could take something with them. We are about to start a new format. We call it CISO Share, which is a workshop workshop format where we invite much less participants, but have a discussion between the participants. There will be a first workshop end of February about third-party cyber risk, and we are planning end of March a workshop covering cloud security. And we want to leverage the cloud security maturity model as a basis, as you mentioned, Lior. We will send out the invites, probably beginning in the next couple of days. And we will invite all the people that registered for the CISO Talk first, because the number of participants is limited. So I would be happy to see all of you in our workshops end of March. And as I already mentioned to Engelbert, we are constantly looking for new topics for our CISO Talks. So if you have an idea in mind that we should cover, just let us know, send us an email, send us a direct message on LinkedIn. And also if you have something, if you have a topic you want to be our guest for, so also let us know. We're always looking for interesting guests such as Lior. All right, thank you to all of you, and thanks for joining, thanks for being our guest, and have a good afternoon. Thank you, bye-bye.
Thank you.